Revenge films.
My name is Jessica Morrison. At home, there's something I really love more than anything in the world, and that's my beloved dog, Randy. Well, I suppose it would be more correct to say that there is something I love more than anything in the world, because Randy recently passed away. When I first met my fiancé, Henry, the first thing I did was to make sure that he liked dogs. And then, when he proposed to me, I had one condition, and that was that I wanted him to first try living with my beloved Randy to make sure that they would get along. Henry also loved dogs, so he was happy to do so, and he moved in with me and Randy. And then, about a year and a half later, the two of us and my one dog were living happily together as a family of three. Life was great, but by that time, Randy was already old. When he passed away peacefully in his sleep due to his old age.
Jessica, just remember how happy Randy was, and what a great life he had. I mean, just look at that. Look at his peaceful face. He looks like he's in the middle of a happy dream, and I'm sure he's jumping around up there already.
It was just as Henry said. When I looked at Randy, after he took his last breath, he looked very peaceful, almost like he was sunbathing, which was his favorite afternoon activity. But even still, I couldn't take Randy for walks anymore, and when I come home, he won't be in the front door to greet me anymore. When I thought about that, the tears wouldn't stop. I'm going to miss him more than any words can ever say. Thanks. I'm sure he was happy. Thanks for loving him too.
I know, Jessica.
Randy was kind and stayed at my side, and he let me cry on his shoulder for days. Randy was just like me. Back at my family home, there was no place for us. We were outcasts. Randy was originally the dog that my older sister Karen insisted on getting. However, even though she insisted to our parents that she would look after Randy and force him to get him, after 3 days she had completely stopped giving Randy any attention, and even feeding him his meals. Of course, that meant that she wasn't taking care of him on his walks either. That was when I took over, and I was the one that started looking after Randy. My parents never paid much attention to me, and they were never affectionate towards me to begin with. I felt like I never had a place in my family, and that's why I felt like Randy and I were my true family. When Randy passed away, I was devastated, and I couldn't get out of bed for most days, and that was when my husband Henry made the suggestion.
Hey, why don't we have a pet funeral for Randy?
A pet funeral? What do you mean?
A funeral for our pet. I've heard of people doing it lately. There's even a funeral home for pets specifically for the occasion. Unlike the usual cremation of a pet, they have a whole ceremony for it, so that you can really bid farewell, and then you can take the bones home with you.
A funeral for Randy? To me, Randy was my family. When I heard that I'd be able to have a funeral to honor him and properly bid him farewell, I decided that I was going to do that. Apparently, when you go to a regular crematory for pets, they say that it's more likely they're burning the body instead of more proper cremation process. They won't let you take home the bones with you. And they say that you don't get to really bid farewell to the pets, that they just take it back for the process. When I imagine what Henry was telling me, it sent chills down my spine. I could never do that to my dear Randy, so I need to make sure that I have a proper funeral for Randy and give him a send-off that he deserves. Henry, will you please let us have a funeral for Randy? Please!
Of course. Leave it to me.
And so, the day of Randy's funeral, Henry and I arrived to the funeral home that was also used for funeral for humans as well. Even though they call it a pet funeral, there weren't many customs in regard to it. Unlike a regular funeral, there is no strict dress code, nor were there any customs to follow. However, the ceremony was being held at a funeral home that was also used for humans, so of course it was a given that most appropriate clothing for the occasion would be funeral clothing, or some attire that would be in line with that. And when we arrived at the funeral home, almost all of the people there, regardless whether it was Randy's funeral or for another funeral, were all dressed in the same way. And since Henry and I both accepted Randy was a previous member of our family, it was a no-brainer for us to be in proper funeral attire for the occasion. When I arrived at the funeral home and gave Randy's favorite toys and some of his photos as offerings to the deceased, tears started overflowing and streaming down my face. This was going to be my final farewell to Randy, and it was extremely emotional for me. However, right at that moment, I heard a high-pitched voice of a woman that didn't sound appropriate for a funeral home at all.
Oh, there you are. So this is where you're doing the whole thing. I guess the pet ones are held in a different area. Well, I guess that's a given, but whatever.
When I turned around at a familiar voice, standing there was my older sister Karen and her husband. When the two of them arrived so suddenly, I was taken aback and didn't know what to do. Because Randy was originally bought from my older sister, and it was also her pet's funeral. I did tell her about it because I felt obligated, but I didn't expect to actually show up. And she lost all interest in Randy. She never took a single walk, nor did she ever feed him, and so I thought it was strange. But then when my my sister and husband came closer and I saw that the way they were dressed, I was shocked. What is she wearing? What is that coat? Karen was wearing a coat. To be fair, it was starting to become a little bit chilly outside, so it wasn't strange to be wearing a coat for this time of year. But the problem with it was the design of the coat. As if she was playing a horrible, terrible prank, Karen's coat was a fur coat, and not only that, the design of the fur was exactly the same colors as Randy's coat.
Oh, did you notice? Do you know how expensive this coat was? It's a real fur, so it's super expensive.
My sister noticed where my gaze was. She suddenly started twirling around to show it off as a coat. But why a coat like that?
Maybe it was rude for me to wear a coat at a funeral. Well, whatever, let me take it off.
When my sister took off the fur coat, underneath she revealed a bright white dress. To say that it went right along with her thick makeup and overbearing perfume was an understatement. Everything about her from head to toe was obviously inappropriate for a funeral home. My husband and I stood there shocked at a loss for words, when my sister started laughing as if to rub it in our faces.
But seriously, I can't believe that you would do something this ridiculous for such a dirty little stray dog like Randy. There must be something wrong with you, but I guess you've always been a weird one, Jessica.
I know, right? This is crazy!
Standing next to Karen, her husband agreed with her and laughed. And even the way he was dressed, even though it was less outrageous compared to Karen, it was completely out of the place. He was wearing a Hawaiian short-sleeved button-up shirt, as if he was going to a tropical holiday. But why are you both dressed like that? I was forcing out the words as I asked them, but then Karen and her husband turned to each other as if they made eye contact, and they started laughing.
Jessica, your face is bright red. It's hard to take anything you say seriously when you're somebody that makes such a big deal out of one little dog dying. But you know, isn't it any human being's free choice to wear whatever they want at a dog's funeral? Why should it matter what I wear? It's not a real funeral anyway.
My sister didn't even try to hide the fact that she was making fun of the ceremony. But that was when Henry spoke up and fought back.
That's not true. This is a funeral home that's also used for ceremonies for deceased humans. See? Have a look over there.
When Henry pointed in the other direction, there was an older couple standing there who looked like they were at a separate funeral.
There are other funerals being held here today, and the way that you were dressed would make anybody that's here to attend a funeral uncomfortable. And that's why a white dress like that and a Hawaiian shirt like that are inappropriate for a place like this.
What? Well then, are you telling me that that's written in the law? I mean, a pet funeral is just for someone that has nothing better to do with their lives anyway, isn't it? It's a waste of time.
Karen, that's not a waste of time. How could you say that? That was when I exploded, and without even thinking, I had raised my voice. Today is the funeral of my family, my precious family that I truly love. And we don't need anyone who's going to show up in a white dress or in a Hawaiian shirt to be here at a time like this. And on top of that, I can't believe that you wore a coat with the exact same fur as Randy as if to rub it in the wound. Get out.
As usual, looks like you haven't changed, Jessica. You've always been so sensitive and you're such a crybaby and a do-gooder. Well, whatever. I gotta laugh more than I thought I would today anyway, so I guess I can leave. You should be grateful to me, you know. Enjoy your little pet funeral.
Karen and her husband started laughing again, and they danced their way out of the funeral home. I couldn't believe it. That was when the older couple, who had been watching the entire time, came over to Henry and me. What terrible people they were. I do hope that you don't take any of it to heart. Yes, thank you very much for your kindness. At the time, we only spoke briefly before we both went our separate ways, but that was when the most unexpected turn of events had started to begin. It turned out that out of pure coincidence, that some kind of fate, the older couple was actually the CEO and wife of the most important client company of the company where Karen's husband was working. Because Karen and her husband were so focused on making fun of us at the funeral home, that even when they pointed towards them, he didn't notice who they were. But of course, the CEO recognized the employee, and the story about his disgraceful behavior and his terrible wife quickly spread throughout the company. Because it was so difficult for him to stay at the company after being isolated, he ended up resigning. However, rumors are already spread throughout the whole industry, and all of the companies denied his job applications. That was when my sister came crying to my door for help. Our parents had already passed away, and I could only imagine that with her personality, she was pretty much shunned by her husband's parents, and they didn't have any contact with them. So there was probably nobody else that she could turn to besides me.
Hey, Jessica, please! My husband isn't able to find a new job yet, and we don't have enough to pay our bills for any living expenses. So can you please give us $1,000 a month? No, I'll even take $500 a month, but please just give it to me!
Don't be ridiculous. Why should I give you any money?
But why not? I looked into it, but I heard that just to burn a dog like that funeral home only took a couple $1,000s from you, right? If you have the money to spend on some stupid little dog, then you could be some use helping your older sister. Isn't that right? Am I wrong? Am I wrong for telling you that you should be helping your real family?
For some reason, now Karen was the one yelling at me, but I remained calm and to answer her. Yes, you are wrong, because you should know that not once in my real life that I ever thought of you as my real family anyway. Randy was the only real family that I had, to me and to you. And that's why spending a couple $1,000s on him is nothing to us compared to the love that he gave us over the years. However, before I continued, I glared directly into Karen's eyes. However, for someone like you who can't understand the pain of what someone is going through, and instead tries to make a joke out of their tragedy, I would never even give $1. No, not even 1 cent to you. That's right, never. My sister probably wasn't expecting me to come out so strong, that she was overpowered and sulked out the door. Then, the next day, this time, my sister came back to my house with her husband, and they immediately got down on their knees to apologize to me.
Please, we beg you! Is there any way that you can please support us so that we can survive? I heard from my wife that you're an extremely kind person, Miss Jessica, and that you have a heart of gold. When I saw that you were hosting a funeral for your pet, deep down inside, I felt like my heart was grabbed by the kindness and pureness of your heart. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I really felt the same way too, so please, Jessica, help us out!
My sister had been looking down the entire time, and when she looked up at me, there was little specks of glistening drops falling down her cheeks. But at the same time, I looked down at her hand, and I noticed that she was holding on some bottle of eye drops. If you really have the ability to prepare a little prop for your charade like some eye drops, then it looks like you're probably doing fine. I refuse to help you in any way.
Damn it! This isn't what you said, Karen! You said that Jessica's weak, so if you cried a little bit, we got down on her knees, that we would be able to pull some money out of her, didn't you? And yet your fake crying didn't even work! She saw right through you! What the hell?
Excuse me? Oh, please, you're the one to talk, but nothing else you couldn't come up with any better plan anyway.
Karen and her husband started to get into a disgraceful fight in front of my door, but all I could do was smile and say one last thing. Please, get out already. Leave. After I kicked my sister and her husband out the front door, I remember one last thing and said, "Oh, that reminds me. Hey, Karen." When I said that, Karen's face brightened in an instant.
Wait a minute. Are you gonna help us? You're best. Thank you.
Nope, as if. I thought that I should just probably tell you this, but...
Huh?
Because I am your biological sister, don't worry. I will be sure to show my face at your funeral when the time comes. And of course, at the ceremony, I'll be wearing proper funeral clothing. Perhaps because she had gotten her hopes up for a brief moment, it seemed like Karen had finally lost all will, as she crumbled down on the floor, and she started to cry for real this time.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.